Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to a special edition of the Pewter Report podcast. We are not live, just because going live at this hour of the day would be ridiculous. We are recording extremely early in the morning if you are on Eastern Standard Time. And if you're on the West Coast, I guarantee you're still asleep or you have not gone to sleep yet. And I am not Matt Matera. I'm not Scott Reynolds or any of your regular Pewter reporters. I am Josh Queipo, and I am joined by an extremely special guest, Ollie Connolly, who is an NFL analyst for The Guardian, as well as his own Substack, The Read Optional, which is excellent, where he goes into nuance that you do not get anywhere else on the schematics of the NFL game in the modern NFL. And you can also see him. He's been featured on Pro Football Focus's podcast, as well as various other places, including the Mina Kimes podcast. And Ollie, you're just about everywhere. So I don't know if I can continue to go through all the different places people can find you. But you have over 10 years of experience in the NFL, analyzing the NFL at this point, including working for scouting departments for colleges, as well as third parties, correct?
That is right, yeah. This is the 15th year I'm doing it. I'm becoming old and grouchy, even at a young age. If the people watching can see me, I don't look that old, but this is the 15th season, and I'm fully into my grouchy era, which is just exciting for the listeners, I think.
I know for me, just in general, not necessarily covering the league because I'm a little bit newer to covering the league, but just in general, do you have a recent NFL, something happened and you go, that makes me feel old, just based on maybe it's a player that you originally covered whose child is now somebody that you're starting to cover?
That one is a really difficult one. I spend most of my time talking to the scouting fraternity or the coaching fraternity, and now the coaches of guys I covered are getting real jobs. They're no longer just like the water boy and things like that. I'm sure it was the same for Mike Silver and guys of his generation when Kyle Shanahan became one of the best coaches in the NFL. Like, this is really strange. I remember Kyle wandering around, as a baby at practice, and now I'm having that experience myself and seeing the guys you kind of grew up with be infinitely more successful than you at the job you started at. And they're going on to run entire franchises and hold the Lombardi. That does make you feel a bit old.
I bet. So, so for today, though, for this special edition, I wanted to get your take on the outlook for the 2025 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was hoping we could start with some schematic things and then move into specific positions and maybe position groups that probably have a large bearing on the success of the team this year. And since you are a defensive guy, although listening to your most recent podcast with former Pewter reporter John Ledyard and your coaching draft, one might not think it because you didn't take a defensive coach for a while.
That's not my fault. That's the league, right? How many top tier defensive coaches are running franchises right now? Right. Mostly the guys doing the really interesting stuff are the DCs who are not being given either a second chance or a first chance. My beloved Vance Joseph, who I've been pounding the table for. It's like year 4 now of me saying, give the guy another chance at this thing. And what's going to happen with him is his style, his innovative outlook will cycle out by the time they give him a second chance, and he'll get his clock cleaned again, probably by the time he returns. And most of just the guys who are having the most success, I think, just happen to be on the offensive side of the ball. John and I disagree, I think, fairly vehemently on the idea now that you have to be a play caller. And that's kind of what everyone gravitates towards, particularly, I think, in the younger online spaces, that the play calling head coach is like the head coach. Whereas I grew up talking about the old school stuff. All of my young career was covering Bill Belichick and the Patriots. He was not the play caller at the offense. He was pretty good at this thing, I like to think. So that's kind of still my outlook on the game and having those CEO qualities. And I think if the whole league has offensive-minded play-calling head coaches, kind of a market inefficiency to have the pick of the litter on the defensive side of the ball and guys who could maybe macro outlook be able to slow those guys down the way the Bucs have done with Todd Bowles, right? Which is we believe in the defensive guy. They believe for some reason in the CEO qualities of the head coach. And we'll just have to cycle through all these different OCs and hope we keep hitting the jackpot year after year as those guys go on to win their franchises.
Well, and to date, Bowles has been very good at picking those offensive coordinators. He inherited Byron Leftwich, but since then he has gone 2 for 2 in one and done offensive coordinators who went on to take head coaching jobs. But let's move to the other side with Todd Bowles. And just from your perspective, can you tell me a little bit about when you watch Todd Bowles' defense schematically? What are some of the tenets that he employs? Do you feel like they are appropriate for a modern game? And he had some struggles last year when everything was said and done due to a bit of a softer back half of the league or back half of the year schedule. Some of the overall numbers turned out pretty good for Bowles, but there were some issues. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what those issues were last year for his defense and what can he potentially do this year to improve upon that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the major issues, as you well know, are coverage on the back end. I don't know how much you put that down, just injuries and lack of talent versus kind of the raw schematic makeup. The thing that fascinates me about him when I watch them, then I dig through some of the figures, is how much of the undergirding is right on par with where you want to be in modern defensive football. If you go through all kind of the raw basics of, okay, what are all the best guys doing, right? Whether it's inverting the downs, whether it's having all these different pressure paths and different outlooks, whether it's packaging your pressures together, it's all there. I don't think it's cranked up to the volume necessary. And I do still think that when you watch them structurally, particularly in the blitz world, which is probably what he's foundationally known for, it all feels, and I try not to be too critical here, a little bit 6-7 years ago, rather than where the game has pushed on to now, where it's being more present about the presentation of your front as it relates to the blitz path, more present with how that presentation ties to your coverage, what you can get away with versus what you can't get away with, and then just some of the nuances within those paths, right? Whether it's changing structurally some of the more traditional blitz designs, whether it's something as simple as like a cross dog pressure, everyone would know, right? One linebacker goes, another one folds behind, tweaking some of those things to keep up with the modern game. I still think just the raw mechanics being, it's all internal pressures. We try and internally plug, we try and flush. All the stuff that you want to see from a coach is there. I think it's more of the details that are lacking at this point, and not so much lacking as just a tiny bit outmoded to where the rest of the league has gone.
Okay. And how much of that do you think is based on the linebacker group that he's had more recently? The Bucs were very successful with Devin White as kind of their mugged up backer for many years. And while White had issues that caused the team to move on from him, last year they did try to replace him with KJ Britt, who just did not have the same athleticism. I think just in our covering of the team, there was a lot of faith and responsibility put into Sarvasier Dennis. Dennis went down after just a few weeks and they lost him for the season. And then that put a lot on the shoulders of Lavonte David in his mid-30s, still playing at a pretty high level. But how much of that responsibility do you think was just too much for Lavonte at this point in his career? And just the general responsibilities of the linebackers, how it related to the defense last year?
Yeah, definitely too much on Lavonte. And Todd Bowles, like all defensive coaches, and it's different, I think, to how fans view the game and what they view as like a great defensive coordinator, right? Most great DCs get their name or their calling card based off either having like one coverage they get associated with, which is bonkers, by the way. They all run every coverage, essentially. Or if they're effective at blitzing, they get the credit, right? It's like, oh, they're really good because the blitz is effective. And I think that the thing that Bowles has struggled with when I'm talking about this kind of like, okay, he's almost 5, 6, 7 years behind where the rest of the league is at in terms of the blitz structure, is having like designated guys. It's like, this is our blitz guy. You just can't live that way in the modern world, partly because everyone's moving and shuffling the formation so much, right? So then you're having to just communicate more to make sure everyone's aligned properly and you get caught out. But it's more just the natural disguise that's built into a defense. We are in a blitz and disguise league, or more so a pressure and disguise league, right? How do we get pressure with 4? Is it our down 4? Or are we simming? Are we creeping? Are we bringing someone else, an odd rusher, to add to the fold and dropping one of the defensive line guys out? And to do that, to have the right canvas to do it, like Mike McDonald or someone who's best known for this stuff, you really have to have everyone be available to pressure. whether that's the safety room, which Bowles is happy to do, whether that's a linebacking room, which Bowles is happy to do. But he really does rely on like a core crutch of concepts and players to get to that stuff. And that is really old school football, which is by down and distance, by personnel. This is my pressure path. And I just think he could do way more. And I've been harping on about this for years, you'll know, about their linebacker room, that it's just not poppy enough. It doesn't spring enough. That first bounce from the multiple linemen is basically everything. The only point of mugging is to scare people, right? It's either to set the protection away you want so that you know the protection and you can just break the thing down either through pressure or through just the down four, or it's to spring out, right? And that spring is really difficult. We see when the Chiefs do it and it looks really impressive, like, wow, that's really cool stuff. It is just such a far way for a human to travel, to spring from mugged up in the A-gap to saying, I'm going to be the pole runner in Tampa 2. It's just a massive distance to cover. So the first two pops out require real explosivity. And that kind of shock and awe style, no matter how good you are at fitting up the run, if you're going to live in a pressure world, which I think no matter what, he's going to live there. And I know they want to try and move more to a 4-man rush. But even with a 4-man rush, I think it's going to tee off this idea that we may be bringing pressure, right? You get into more of the simulated sub-pressure world. To do that, the major thing you need from your linebackers is just initial pop. It's someone like Ivan Pace, who is not a good technical linebacker, who would drive Todd Bowles crazy at like shuffling through the trash and fitting the run appropriately. But just the raw springs make him terrifying to every offensive lineman. He can spring forwards and he can spring out into coverage. Same when you look through someone like the Broncos, who have a similar style, similar ethos, right, to what Todd Bowles wants to do. Someone like Justin Stranard, who may not even start for them this year, but was fantastic for them last season, principally because when he's mugged up, he can spring forwards, he can spring backwards explosively in 1 or 2 steps. And I just looked through their roster, and I have them for years, and said they are still sitting old school in. We have a designated blitz guy, and we really, really do care about stopping the run. And that is the thing, the takeaway, as I was saying before, about how fans view the game versus the coaches view the game, is stopping the run and fitting the run is still everything to these guys. It's all they care about. Are they structurally sound and fitting the run? Everything else, coverage, pressure pass, flow from that. And I still think he's just a little bit too more cautious on that end about what he wants communication-wise from some of the senior heads and just body type-wise from players who can fit the run, as opposed to being comfortable saying, we may get cooked every once in a while, but our goal is to get off the field, right? So, and our goal is to do it with pressure. Therefore, we're going to have to sacrifice some elements and get more explosive in our mugged alignments.
So that brings me to the linebacker room as it's structured currently for 2025. Like I mentioned earlier, the team had a lot of hopes that SirVocea Dennis, while KJ Britt would help them with the run stuffing on early downs, early last year, SirVocea Dennis tended to be more of their long and late guy, somebody they brought on the field for third down to help them in more of a pass coverage look. It seems like the team is moving more towards Dennis being a full-time starter this year. So based on his limited snaps, what have you seen from SirVocea Dennis? Do you feel like he might have that springiness to be mugged up and then be able to be that Tampa 2 pole runner? Or do you think there are gaps in Dennis's game where Bowles is once again going to have to be a little bit more finitely structured in this person does this, that person does that?
Yeah, I still worry that that's the way they view the game, right? Is that even if he's starting, that it's still more run fitter. He's really good, I think, agile in and out of the crevices of the line of scrimmage. I think that's where he can do his most damage. Early downs, run downs, and then you mentioned the coverage world and some of the lateral quick side to side, the processing, the picking things up, handing things off. That's, I think, where they view him. Even if you go all the way back to Pitt, he was not an effective blitzer. And at Pitt, they really did try to use him as a blitzer from depth, which has been one of Bowles' like preferred tactics anyway. With the linebackers, it's just not his game at all. He doesn't have the feel for it. There can have been some development over the time now. In the NFL, it's unusual, honestly, that guys majorly develop as blitzers from depth in the league. It's one of those things that really does, you can see it and it translates. It takes a long time for guys to pick that side of the game up. I just don't know if he has the raw springs, the true springs. It's taller body type, you would have to be someone like Devondre Campbell is a great example of this, where you wouldn't have expected him to necessarily be a guy who just played in that vertical plate and had the long arms and broke stuff up. That is more what you would be looking at. It's how then do you marry that and relate that to someone else? Because if you're going to try and move to more of the 4-down world or get pressure with 4, but you put a 5-guy investment in the front, which I know can sound complicated, but essentially we're going to put 5 guys down there, but we're only sending 4. You have to have the 5th guy be a true potent rusher to make the offense respect the fact they could come. And then that's when you get the dropout. So if we're only putting 5 guys in that investment, someone stood off the ball, right? And so if you know the team far better than I do, if that is, let's just say, the structure for whatever, 4 or 5 third downs in a game, right? I imagine that he will be the guy off the ball because you want to get him more naturally in a coverage place, and it would put David into a more natural spot too, which is attacking at the line of scrimmage. So you almost immediately in what would be maybe this evolution Todd Bowles has talked about of, okay, how can I attack this slightly differently, building on my principles? You already again see the direct split between the two, at least in my opinion. And I think the same goes if you look through some of the backup guys, say there's an injury or someone's just not playing very well, it's a lot of old hands, right? It's guys who are known as maybe penetrators more so than they are mugged up blitz attack players or even blitz from depth guys. Most of what those guys do blitz from depth is raw effort, raw tenacity, and just body count. And you can find body count with guys you get undrafted.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was an expectation that the team would invest more assets into the position. And coming from last year where they were using undrafted free agents quite a bit after Dennis went down and KJ Britt was injured for a little bit. And then when he came back, he kind of he wasn't used quite as much. And so there was this expectation that maybe they used premium draft pick on linebacker, but it was not a great draft for linebackers. This was something that you and I talked about extensively through the draft process. And then we saw it bear out with the league. I think there were only 4 linebackers taken in the top 100 picks. But even in free agency, the Bucs elected for basically a veteran minimum deal for Anthony Walker Jr. And they brought Deion Jones back, who they got literally off the scrap heap middle of last year. He had actually a couple of decent reps in the wild card loss to the Commanders. And that's who they've decided that they want to go with. If Dennis goes down again, or if Levante goes down, they seem content going with veterans who will know where to be. And maybe.
And to be honest, Josh, I don't think you can blame them in some sense for that. There's like the ideal in my head of what they should do. And as I said, I've been banging. I mean, I'm for the listeners, linebacker scout and coach by trade initially. So I'm obsessed about the linebacker position. Todd Bowles is obsessed about the linebacker position. So it's just like a melding of the minds. Like, okay, how does he view it versus how I view it? And there's one way I think he should evolve the system and the body type he should go for. He's also coaching day to day and looking at a defense that had such a disaster just trying to communicate and line up properly last season. He's probably thinking, well, yeah, I would like in an ideal world to maybe we could get Carson Swester in the second round and do some more creative stuff. I also would like everyone to be in the right spot. That would be very beneficial to me. And that goes back to this idea of they obsess about run fits, and the communication in the run fit world is so difficult, and having everyone lined up properly is so difficult. A lot of these guys, particularly when you see the defensive head coaches, you can run through the trends of this stuff. They always default to like, I'm going to fill the back end roster out with guys from the scrap heap. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and pull in a guy who's been in the same system for 3 or 4 seasons somewhere else as a good communicator. I'll go and get the guy who's bounced around, has injury concerns. But I remember him from his draft interview, and he was really intelligent, and maybe he can just cross the threshold for just still athletic enough, just not injury prone enough to bring into the team. They all seem to do this. Whereas I was just really hoping, and I know Jihad Campbell was the one that was, pegged to them a lot during the draft season. There were plenty of guys who fit this model at the lower end of the draft board. And the position now has become, as you've probably heard me talk about a ton, and I don't want to wang on about linebackers for too long, it is a pure developmental position now. It's taken 3 years for these guys minimum to have any sense of what's going on. Everyone comes into the league and is terrible in coverage, right? So if you find a good one, you've hit the jackpot. So really then it's what do we want to mold? And there were a ton of guys who played in this spring and dropout system, because that's what everyone's doing in college football the entire time. So you had a really easy cut-up reel of saying, okay, just get me the springiest guy backwards. We'll figure out the forward stuff. We can make the forward movement surge work if they just have pop and sizzle. they're not there to be our dominant pass rusher. They're there to free up the Haason Reddick signing we made to go and eat, right? That's why they're there. So you could have gone and found that guy and said, we're going to put him on the back end of the roster. It's a 3-year investment. We'll do one in the 4th round. We'll steal another one in the 7th round. We'll go and find 2 developmental guys. And maybe they think they've done that in undrafted free agency the way Ivan Pace did with the Vikings. I just doubt it with the plays they bought in. So I thought it was really disappointing. I understand it, but I thought it was really disappointed they didn't try and take one swing in the draft.
I totally understand what you're saying. As you know, my number 1 linebacker on my board, which will probably turn out to be the worst take of the 2025 NFL draft, was somebody they could have gotten late in the rounds, who did have some springiness to him. But I wonder, and we'll move on, but just kind of rounding out, based on everything that you just said, Servassier Dennis was somebody they took on day 3, who does have the springiness, who does have kind of those coverage abilities, and he's entering year 3. So It would seem that if this project in Dennis goes the way the team obviously thinks it's going, he has become exactly what you just described. So
exactly. But the problem is
one basket.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that we don't, and he just got injured. So the problem is you don't have multiple similar body types to fill the spot. And you really do need 2 or 3 of those guys if you're going to run a heavy mugged up system. Now, maybe he's going to say this, like, metamorphosis he's had in his mind of what his scheme is that I'm out of that world. I mean, that would be a major personality transplant for a man who's been pretty similar for a long, long time, right? It would be pretty wild if he woke up and thought that way. What I imagine is he wants to tweak some of the mechanics of what they get to, maybe to have a little bit more versatility in what he's doing, maybe ideally package his blitz package together better, which requires way less teaching. And packaging a blitz is just the same way an offense runs the same concept from 10,000 different fronts. These older school guys like Todd Bowles I mentioned before, they run the same stuff, the same pass from the same looks. Whereas the newer school, new style of people like Mike Macdonald has far fewer pressure designs and pressure paths than Todd Bowles does. He just runs them from so many different looks because everyone is available to run the path. And it becomes really easy to teach because everyone just runs through the gauntlet of, okay, you're this guy now in the path and you go first, this guy goes second, you drop here. And all of a sudden it multiplies over time where you have 9, 10, 12 different calls you can make on a Sunday, but you've only had to install it one time. And so maybe that's more what he's thinking about when he's talking about this evolution, is just better ways I can get to my stuff, make it more easily digestible, makes us more sound in the coverage on the back end, doesn't impact the rush particularly, just who's in the rush. And just by having that more natural disguise, having, more multiples to my generic blitzes, maybe that's where he's looking at in the evolution. But it just requires having 2, 3, 4 of these guys with similar body types, the way they do with the Chargers in LA, the way they do with the Bills, even though that's not a top linebacking core. Everyone can kind of slot into every single role. And I just look at their roster now, even if Dennis is on that perfect 3-year trajectory, which, as you mentioned, he is, there's no one else there on that trajectory. There's not even the guy who's thumping his head against the wall for the first 2 seasons because he doesn't get it yet, which every other team is doing. You still got to put the guys out on the field to get to that 3rd-year trajectory the way that Dennis is.
That's fair. I love that you talked about the evolution because in the offseason, Bowles has spoken of a eureka moment that he had when he was going through last year's tape and what he wants the team to be this year. He hasn't divulged that, which is obviously understandable, but this could be point towards what that eureka moment may be. Something else you mentioned that I did want to get to is how to make the Haason Reddick signing really worth the investment. And Bowles has talked extensively about how his defense can be a lot better if his just getting home with 4, his 4-man pass rush can be more effective than it has been in recent years. So the team did let Joe Tryon-Shrink move on in free agency. Haason Reddick was their big free agency addition on a 1-year prove-it deal. Obviously, Haason Reddick, if you were coming off of 2023, this would be probably a bigger deal than it is. But given he missed a lot of time last year, obviously fighting with the Jets over a contract. But he did return late in the season. And I was wondering if you had a chance to look at what that tape looked like. Obviously, he didn't have the ramp up of a training camp, may have come in not in the best physical condition. But what did you see on tape? What do you think that could mean for their 4-man pass rush when you put him on a line with Kalijah Cansey, Vita Vea, Yaya Diaby, and then perhaps if you've seen a little bit of Chris Braswell, what he might bring as that fifth part of their rotation.
Yeah, I wouldn't bank on Braswell a whole bunch, honestly. I think more of a heavy setting, thumping guy than he would be someone who can really help fuel your rotation. With Reddick, I did watch him at the back end of last season for my sins watching that team, and I would just give it a complete write-off, honestly, and I would just say as long as the guy's in shape, these upfield springy pass rushes, right, we see these guys come through the league all the time, right, where they sign one-year deals in one spot, they pop again, they go somewhere else on a one-year deal. The Rams do this all the time of just, going through all the hands who have some true upfield rush. I think it's a really impressive room now. Honestly, I think that you look at the versatility, the blend of different body types, how you can get home, the way you can set the front is, I think you can be more creative now. I think often we look at these kind of dip and rip guys, as I call them, which is what Haason Reddick is, right? It's true. Surge up the field, dip and bend around the arc. It's hard to win that way in the league with multiple guys like that. You truly do need some kind of power, some pocket compression. One side of the pocket kind of vices in and collapses the pocket diagonally, and then the other guy swoops around the edge as a two-way go and can fall back inside. The only true way to, I think, win with two upfield rushes is to be the Broncos with Von Miller when they faced Cam Newton and they were off the snap in a flash and no one could do anything about them. Hard to find serial Hall of Famers like DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller just hanging around out in the league. But now if you look at the blend of guys they've got, they really have a dose of everything, right? They have true inside surge to just destroy the pocket internally. Then you can have the swoop up the arc from one side, and they've got crushes, I think, coming from the edge. You get Cansey and Reddick as the true speed up the arc, and then from the other side you can maybe get Diaby too, I guess, as speed up the snap. Diaby I think can also be a speed to power guy. Logan Hall can be a speed to power guy, and just what they can do now in terms of more of the overload fronts, which he's really gotten into recently, which is like splitting your line of scrimmage in half. We'll put three bodies to one side. Usually you put all the bigs to one side, you put the speed guy to the other side, and then you can tee off with more of the stunt and twist world. But just having locked in for all his flaws, which is he can lose the rep really quickly, Haason Reddick. He kind of wins it or loses it immediately. You're getting true surge speed off the snap. And I just don't know if they felt that they had that effectively, efficiently, consistently last season. Cansey, I think, has got a real chance to do that. I think he can play inside, outside, but it's just not quite the same long arm springs initial surge off the ball.
Yeah, I loved some of the outside reps that Cansey had last year. He was winning fairly consistently. I think it was the Saints week. Was it week 5 or it might have been the end of the year? But he was winning quite a few on the outside against the Saints, and so that's something that I'm hoping that Bowles kind of leans into, because Diaby is also somebody who has the body type to win inside. So it does give him that versatility that you were talking about.
The thing with Cansey, I think, and I feel this a lot of times with players, is sometimes they think there's something they're not. And it's really tough for him because his skill set doesn't make a ton of sense in his frame. He's so explosive, right? And I think he does want to play on the end. But when he goes on the end, you just want to say to him, you just spring off the ball and get through someone's chest. And if you beat them out the stance, you're going to shorten the distance anyway. You can fly in, off the outside shoulder and close home. But all you should do is run through someone's face. You're so explosive. They'll be panicked. They'll tie their feet up. He really wants to dance with people. He really wants to be a top-end elite edge rusher. And that's great. That's fun. It looks really good in camp, by the way. And it looks good in the Saints game where he's getting these two-way, three-way rushes and he can hit spin moves back inside. He's really tight and compact doing that stuff. But it's also we are here to win games, not to have really fun, cool reps every once in a while. So you line up as wide as you can and you run through someone's face as hard as possible. And you're so quick off the ball, they will panic. And that's your job. Let's cut trying to be Von Miller. You'll never be Von Miller, but you can be really, really productive and effective, and we'll get you a monster payday if you just commit to, I'm going to rush the quarterback pretty much the same way on 80% of my reps.
Got it. So moving to the back end of the defense, and I hope you appreciate that I started with defense and we are going extensively on the defensive side of the ball. The Bucs made a major investment in the back end of their defense, in part because last year Josh Hayes was getting quite a lot of snaps. And it wasn't for lack of preparation. The team did bring in Bryce Hall, who was supposed to be their third outside corner, but they lost Hall literally in week 1. And so all of a sudden, Tyreek Funderburk and Josh Hayes were getting a lot of snaps when Jamel Dean did miss time during the season. So second round, Bucs take Benjamin Morrison. Third round, they take Jacob Parrish. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how those two players could potentially impact this defense this year. Parrish, I think, has developed a reputation as he's going to be a slot option for the Bucs as he moves into the NFL, although Todd Bowles has gone out of his way to say that he can be an outside guy. And as you look at the corners, I think Zion McCollum has one of the outside corner jobs kind of set. Jamel Dean, when he's healthy, he's still a above average cornerback in the NFL. And so if you assume he's healthy coming out of camp, that really just leaves that nickel job for Morrison and Parrish to fight over. Do you think Morrison, who's not really been profiled as a nickel, could potentially win that job? And if so, how do each of those players look in the slot to you? And could they improve this pass defense?
Morrison in the slot will concern me.
Okay.
To me, he loses a lot quickly. If he loses at all, it's quick, and it's usually a quick in break. It's usually some sort of sharp in cut, sharp redirect, hezzy step one way, snap back across the face the other way, and he can get grabby and confused and get himself off balance. Now you just picture someone in the slot, you've got an immediate 3-way go, everything's available, it's about being agile. That's my concern with Morrison. I know that to me, the profile was like a long, smooth, bump and run corner who's really active and wants to be involved in the hand fight early on, and then can kind of press you and hold you at arm's length on more of the vertical stuff down the sideline. Moving that into the slot would give me real concern. I don't quite know if he has the gathering long speed that's been mooted about with him, if he's not in phase engaged with someone where he can kind of use them and shadow them, as opposed to it's just like if you get a straight burning crosser with a free release, a free access release, you put someone in some kind of stacked formation and someone's coming out on a crossing route. I don't think he picks that, what I call latch and grab stuff up so well, which is like, I'm off the ball, but I'm in man coverage. So I'm basically going to cheat. I'm going to hold someone, get away with it because the refs don't call that, and then mirror them and follow them down the field. That to me just isn't his game. And even at the point of attack, when he's up in press and it's a quick in-breaker, he can just get rocked. People can run him over and really smash him up. So Todd Bowles knows more than me. That concerns me. I think he's got unbelievable eyes and instincts. I actually said during the draft season, I would be interested in trying him at safety. So if you could put him in some sort of, we're trying to figure out both of us what this kind of like, religious moment that Todd Bowles had watching film over the summer. The league has moved so heavily to, if not at 3 safety sets, to having someone who can function as an auxiliary third safety for you to just kind of get a different, more interesting, creative disbursement of coverage on the back end. Could you maybe do some more of him with that? And usually that is the guy who plays the nickel or the overhang spot sliding out. I would be really interested to see him try some of that stuff and get his eyes on the ball a bit more. But to me, he was always more of a boundary corner who, when pushed inside, would have some difficulties. So yeah, that would concern me, I think.
Okay. So it sounds to me like you think Parrish would be the better option for the nickel, because the team does seem dead set on moving Tyke Smith to more of an up top safety to rotate with Antoine Winfield. For me personally, I think that the two of them have Winfield and Smith, that is, have similarities that it will allow for more creativity on the back end. Both of them can work up well to the line of scrimmage. Winfield has a full season at slot that they tried back in 2022, I think it was. And Winfield works well in the box. And of course, he's great at the post. And I think Smith is going to bring some similarities, maybe not so great as a post player, but certainly as a split field safety, can definitely work in the box and move down into the slot. Do you think Parrish allows for that creativity and just a better blend of the back end?
I think he's your better, more traditional nickel. We don't actually have a ton of those anymore. Like what's happening in the slot has changed so much. I think people still think the slot is like you're defending Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, where it's all like these twirl routes and in-out read routes. It doesn't really work that way anymore. But in that world, that's where Parrish would thrive. It's more of that shorter pocket rocket build, right? He's really agile, really twitched up. I think he's really smooth when he has to press and move vertically. If he had to roll back and then read the game out, I'm not so sure. But he's way less panicky than Morrison is up at the point. So if you're just looking for, we were so bad last season, people wide open all the time. Everyone panicked when we had to communicate. This guy gets it from the neck up. Even if it's not understanding all the contortions of the scheme, the guy gets the one-on-one aspect and won't panic. If we're going to be more man coverage based, that would make more sense to me. Now, maybe he's not as far along in the development of some of the schematic stuff as Morrison would be. Morrison played in a way more expansive defense at Notre Dame. The entire thing was pro style, pro ready, as in the coverage, some of the nuances of the coverage in a way that we just don't see in college football anymore. It was a true like carbon copy professional defense. But I think Parrish has more of those natural twitchy slot type stuff. I just don't know if he could give you more of the flexibility in your rotational stuff as Morrison could do if he played in there. So it's really like a pick what you want out of the position type thing, and maybe one guy's just further ahead intellectually where you feel more comfortable being on the field. But if you're looking for, okay, we want to get wacky or wonky with our rotations on the back end, Morrison would make more sense to me. If it's we're going to be playing a ton of man coverage no matter what, and we're going to keep our slot in the slot, and we're not going to flip-flop and have guys roll outside, even if they're playing inside, Parrish makes more sense to me as just a one-on-one defender.
Gotcha. All right. We've done quite a bit on the defense. You ready to move to the offense?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's start with the big change, which isn't personnel related because the Bucs have somehow brought back every starter from last year. But it is up top on the headset, and that is at offensive coordinator. So Liam Cohen, who I know you're a big fan of him from a schematic and play design perspective, he's now the head coach for Jacksonville. The Bucs have decided to internally promote Josh Grizzard. Grizzard spent quite a bit of time in Miami under several different head coaches. So he does have a bit of influence from a lot of different schemes. Most recently, before coming to Tampa Bay, there was his time with Mike McDaniels. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about just anything you know about Grizzard. What do you think he might bring to the position building off of Cohen's system?
That's a really tricky question. The thing that made Cohen so special was the adaptability, the versatility. I think not even the in-game feel, the pre-game preparation, the game planning was just so next level where they could just wholesale change what they were doing week to week. And he did something that I just personally love with offensive coaches, which is we are just going to run the same stuff over and over again until they stop it. We're not going to try and overthink this thing and decide that I'm going to unload the whole clip in one game. I have a fountain of ideas flowing out of my head. Why didn't I distribute them over the course of a season rather than trying to show off how great I am in one game? And they would just run the same stuff over and over again. And the thing that separated Cohen, I think, and the reason I admired him so much is just the idea of play sequencing, the idea of layering your offense together. How do we get our run game to look like our RPO game? How does our RPO game flow into our play action shot game? How does our play action game flow through look, feel, sound, everything, touch, smell, to look like our drop back game, whether that's the formation, that can even be the protection, right? We're pulling someone or moving someone in the protection. All that stuff was so perfect with him. That is going to be really hard to replicate. I think what Grizzard is walking into is, I thought by the midpoint of last season onwards, that was the best offensive line in the NFL. The most well-coordinated, crafted together, working as a unit offensive line in the league. Obviously, as all your listeners will know, they changed the mechanics of the run game anyway at the midpoint of the season. Another real testament to Liam Cohen. Those wide zone guys usually say this isn't working. The only way out of it is to keep running it, that they rep through it, those guys. And Cohen said, no, I'm good. And not only did he say, no, I'm good, he was somehow able midstream to bring all those elements I mentioned before about, okay, I'm going to have to build a new RPO package. I'm going to have to build a new play action package. I'm going to have to build a new drop back package, all flowing off that. And he was able to do that. That's just not normal. It is so unusual for a coach to be able to do that. Usually they can change one of those elements and it's effective and the offense can work. It's never that everything else gets better as a result of that because it's all tied together so perfectly. That is a major, major task for Grizzard to try and match up to, right? Because even if he says, we're going to run the same offense does he have that week-to-week feel? Does he have the game plan instincts? He might be a better game day play caller for all we know, and it might be less effective because the game planning's worse. He might be a better game plan builder and a less effective game day play caller, having that feel on the fly for what needs to change, knowing how to set up plays to be able to get some payoff plays later on. So it's a big challenge, but I think bringing a Booker in gives him a whole bunch of versatility with what they can do formationally. He's still got that offensive line. They've turned Luka Decky in from a guy I thought was unrosterable in the league to, outside of Penny Sewell, the most effective, truly by the figures, the most effective pulling player in space in the entire league. So he's got an amazing canvas to work with. And if all else fails, as Dave Canales found the year before, Dave Canales a major payday and a head coach job was we can just throw slants to Mike Evans. We can just go isolation. It's third down. Baker's good at this stuff. Evans is, one of the all-time greats. I'll just default to that if need be.
Well, since you brought up both Egbuka and then Mike Evans, let's talk a little bit about the receiver position because Evans went through a bit of a renaissance last year. He was kind of forced into it because when the Bucs lost Chris Godwin, and actually Evans went down for a month, but when he came back, there really had not been a receiver who had taken over as somebody that Baker Mayfield could trust. Sterling Shepard certainly had some nice reps. I thought he played very well, even though the production wasn't quite there, but he worked for the offense and some of the things that they needed to do to get to other things. Cade Otton had to kind of become their weapon while both the top two guys were gone. So Evans comes back and you see he's being used in a lot of different ways. He's the amount of reps that he was working from the slot was some of the highest in his career. Less of the vertical wins than you see from Evans over the course of his career, but he was really working the intermediate levels a lot more over the middle. And it seemed like that allowed him to hit a level of efficiency and effectiveness that even he hasn't hit in what's shaping up to be a Hall of Fame career. I say that because then you also have Chris Godwin, who should be back at some point this year. And Godwin has proven that he is at his most effective in the slot. Jalen McMillan's best production last year came from the slot. And Emeka Egbuka is, in many ways, kind of a Chris Godwin clone in terms of how he won at Ohio State. So you have four guys who all seem to work best from the slot at their individual points in their career at this point. And I think that goes to a league-wide trend where most of your best offensive coordinators are understanding that I want to get my best receivers into the slot because they have those multiple, options when they're releasing. They can get vertical, they can move in, they can move out. So if you're Grizzard, how do you balance that across four guys where all of them seem to operate best out of this one specific part of the alignment?
Yeah, I think you frame it as though it's a problem. I think it's like an exciting thing, which is we have complete multiplicity in our receivers. Because yes, I think Evans can now do his best work from that position, in part because just him as the frame he has on these kind of, you mentioned the intermediate stuff, it's just returning to the football, right? We know him almost as an over-the-shoulder catch guy or sideline guy. This frame returning to the football, his understanding of where he should be in the route is the highest level. I've said this many places before, but to me, there's like Hall of Famers. Then there's like walk off the field, put the jacket on them Hall of Famers. To me, Mike Evans is like let's put him in a jacket now and have him running around in a cape on Sundays because he's that good of a player. And I think the listeners here understand, but I don't think the national people quite understand how special and extraordinary he is. I think they see the counting figures and like the career he's having, and they're like, oh, we'll go to the Hall of Fame. You watch him day by day, game by game. He does some of the most extraordinary things you'll ever see from a wide receiver in this modern era. But to me, it's an exciting challenge of you could either go by having it all condensed all the time. Now everyone has to be a willing blocker. And that's the number one thing about what you're mentioning, the trend of top offensive minds moving their star guy into the slot. That is largely, as you mentioned, there's just an ocean of space to the other side of the field, and you can corrupt these two deep coverage by either having the guy burst through the middle of it and everyone panicking. So much of this game is about who panics first, right? Or getting them all the way to the side of the field without having to drag them from one boundary to the other boundary. But to be able to do that effectively, the person has to be willing to stand in, dig, and block people out. That's the only way you can layer the offense in the effective way to hit the payoff shot plays. It's the only way. They have to be effective in the run game to be able to get us to the play action stuff, to be able to release adequately in the drop back game. I think Evans is built for that. Egbuka is a unbelievably willing blocker inside. He will dig anyone out. This is like Robert Woods level of like, he is up for this fight like very few people. You know, I'm a huge Egbuka fan. I think some of the shine came off him around the draft season because everyone's just like, oh, he's really good at everything. And it's like, does he have the star quality? I think if you're playing next to Mike Evans and you get fed enough touches, there's going to be star-like production. And I think Egbuka can play outside and can play inside. Evans can play outside and can play inside. So there may be an odd man out in terms of, you mentioned McMillan and Shepard, but that's a fine problem to have because if you're leaving them out, it means the other guys are eating just fine. So I don't really see it as a major downside. You could get into more of, are you trusting, are you willing the offensive line and Baker Mayfield to say, we'll play from empty so we can have a double slot situation? And can we play from empty in a way the Rams have done where it's not traditional empty with all five guys kind of spread and evenly dispersed across the formation, but we're going to get into a double stack. So there's essentially four guys in the slot, or we'll get into a bunch in the stack. So we have four guys essentially in the slot. That is the stuff I would be looking at if I was Grizzard, and he comes from that kind of background. So I imagine we'll see him dabble with it. It's just, you've really got to trust the quarterback in that situation. And do they trust Baker to be a five-guy readout? Does the offensive line hold up that well in a true five-out, wider split style of offense? But that is one workaround you could do if you really want to get everyone into kind of their best position. If you want to add more optionality to the offense where guys are reading things on the fly, which is something these guys do really well, that is something you could look at. I just think the downside there is almost unnecessary when you're so effective with this original style of offense.
Got it. Sticking with the wide receivers really quick, because the Egbuka pick was a surprise to many, certainly many of our viewers and readers and just Bucs fans in general, because Jalen McMillan did have quite the back half of the season, right? Certainly the touchdown production late in the season was incredible. Just his overall receiving numbers across the board really improved from, what was it? I think around week 12 on. I just got done doing a deep dive, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on him as it relates to Egbuka, and how do you think those snaps will work themselves out once Godwin gets back? Who would you be trying to get on the field more often? And what is it about McMillan's game that you like, and where do you think there may be some limitations?
I think, honestly, I'm so infatuated with Egbuka. McMillan has more of the proven track record now, I guess. But I just think Egbuka has a chance to truly be like a day one star in the league. He is just so smooth. And one of the differences between him and McMillan, I think McMillan is more of a point and shoot player that you get here in the route concept and off you go and hit your landmark and hit your depth as and when you can. Egbuka, I just think, has more nuance, more subtlety to his game. The key thing you hear all receivers talk about, and DBs in particular, because they're terrified of these guys, is just selling the route, right? How late can you tip where you're actually going to end up? And Egbuka is one of the most polished guys to come out of college football in years and years at getting to where he needs to get too late. And that is the key in the NFL. I mean, when you see a lot of these high-end picks flame out, the guys who are reported out of college, whether it's because they're just kind of size, weight, speed phenoms who don't put it together in the league, or even someone like Marvin Harrison Jr., they are also, similar to McMillan, more point and shoot players. It's just that they win a lot in college football because they're more talented than everyone they're playing against. Egbuka, to me, plays at a pro tempo in terms of like modulating the route, and then just wins late in the rep. And winning in the league is all about tempo and timing and rhythm. And can you win late? Because if you separate late, there's no time to recover. And when you pair that with the versatility, I mean, Egbuka played in the backfield some for Ohio State because they were like, this guy will play fullback for us and smoke someone off the edge. And he did it. And it was not very good, but he tried his best. And that's the kind of player I want on my team. And so McMillan, I think that the raw production comes more from the route concept and the combination and the willingness to get there than it is the traditional talents of how a receiver separates on their own, if that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. What I came away with, I was very encouraged. You mentioned one of the things that's really important for receivers, especially coming out of the slot, is their willingness to block. And as I watched it, I didn't realize this during the season last year, but as I went back and watched all of his reps, he improved so much as a blocker from early in the season when the effort wasn't there. Like you could tell he did not want to scrap. He was, he was losing connectivity, losing contact very quickly. And then you look at him late in the season, and there was it was like a light switch turned on. I don't know if it was something that the team said to him or his coaches said to him. He missed a few games, I think, with a hamstring issue midway through the season. But when he came back, that back half of the season, McMillan was much more engaged and willing as a blocker, and the mechanics were just better as well. Like he was legitimately springing things downfield. So that was one of the things that I was really impressed about. The other thing with McMillan is he was their deep guy in a lot of different, especially late in the season when they transitioned Evans into more of an intermediate winner, but he just doesn't pop off the line. Like he doesn't have that immediate speed, a term that you used earlier and I've gotten more familiar with has been, he's a speed gatherer. He just seems to be somebody from, say, 7 to 15 yards. That's where all of his speed comes from. And then he's on top of the safety or he's behind the corner. And the Bucs used him effectively as such. If not he won downfield quite a bit. I think his average touchdown was 21 yards out, right? So a lot of his touchdown production did not come in the low red zone. It came from deeper out. But even just stretching the defense to allow for that intermediate stuff to open up with the rest of the team. A lot of Egbuka's the hype around him is he can play all three positions, which may be very important because if Evans goes down, there's not really an X behind him. Even Egbuka is not a traditional X, although I think that they could probably make do with him, or at least the team plans on if that were to happen, he's the guy they would move to. With McMillan, do you see more or less positional versatility with him? For me personally, I came away both encouraged by what I saw at the end of the year, but also very much like he's in a box. He seems to me like more of a Z receiver. You want to keep him off the line. You want him to be the snap motion guy because it allows for an easier release for him. Because the press man stuff that he faced wasn't his best tape.
No, I think you've nailed it. You want him to be your vertical press guy in the middle of the field. That is what every team is looking for right now. Is everyone's going to play split safety defense? The best way to attack it is to punch someone right through the middle. That's what we'll do. And then one of them is going to have to fold down, or they both press back, as you mentioned. You climb on top of the safeties, and you get this giant void in the middle of the defense. And hey, look, we get to throw it to a Hall of Famer in the void created. Everyone high fives Jalen, thanks him for his work, and we return to the huddle. Right? That's where I think he's best, and that goes to my point about the point and shoot nature of his style, which is we just need you to be there. You're an X on the chalkboard for us, and that just happens to be your top skill set. You do gather speed. You don't create shock off the snap for everyone else. People aren't converging on you. You are a piece in the puzzle to create room for everyone else. And then if you're there and you do cap the safety, we'll throw you the ball down the field. So I think that is where he fits best, where with Egbuka, there's just way more tempo and nous to how he runs his patterns. I think he can get a free release off the line of scrimmage playing inside. I am not about moving Egbuka outside. If Mike Evans goes down, the whole house of cards may cave in. I apologize. And I don't want to worry people too much. He isn't snappy enough in the hips for me to play, all the effortless, easy, throw it off the sideline, out route comeback stuff where Mike Evans steals you 2 first downs a game in a way very few people in the league can do on something that's so basic and effortless for these guys. Egbuka just doesn't have that kind of sink and snap in the hips playing outside the numbers like that. To me, it is way more about how do I use my craft to kind of set someone one way, then I'm going to press, then I'm going to set the other way. Like it's really more of a dance with him than with someone like Evans, where just by, raw talent, you can just throw the ball outside the numbers and he's going to come down with it.
Okay. All right. Last thing on the offense, and then, and I appreciate your time and I'll let you go, but Godwin may not be ready for week 1. And then with Grizzard, we had mentioned kind of at the top when we were talking about offense. Before coming to Tampa, he was most recently with Mike McDaniels down in Miami. McDaniels is known for playing out of heavier personnel sets. He used a lot of 21 with a traditional fullback coming from a Shanahan background. Shanahan obviously made Kyle Juszczyk a household name with the traditional fullback, but you also see a lot of 12 personnel from those guys. Do you think that one of the influences that Grizzard could bring to the Bucs offense would be more 12 personnel sets, especially if Godwin is out to begin the season, even with McMillan and Egbuka on the roster? And if so, have you watched any of Payne Durham? And I know a lot of Bucs fans are very excited about the 2024 seventh round draft pick, Devin Culp out of Washington. What have you seen? Because I know when I went back and looked at some of that Payne Durham stuff, Otten was out for a few games towards the end of the season. I came away very encouraged with Payne Durham as a blocker, just in line, working as kind of that traditional tight end, and what he could potentially mean for their run game. And then he had some really nice contested grabs as well in his few reps that he got throughout the season. Just your thoughts on 12 personnel in general. It is a league-wide trend, how that may occur in Tampa Bay, and then your thoughts on the depth at the Bucs at tight end.
12 is a league-wide trend. It's a little different. Most teams are doing that out of a sense of necessity. The trend is trying to get to some kind of power-based football with trying to keep as many pass catches on the field. So we see the Bills put the extra lineman on the field a ton, right? They throw my beloved Alec Anderson, they throw out on the field because they're trying to get to some facsimile of having an extra blocker on the field. They didn't have the talent to do it with someone who could also catch the ball. But everyone's trying to get to, we need a sixth blocker in here. It just means that we can do more in the run game and then do more in the play action game because of it, to that point earlier about layering your offense. So everyone's trying to get to, how can we have all five guys be eligible to pull? Right, that makes it a nightmare for the defense. And to do that, we got to get an extra body on the field so everyone can pin and pirouette around everyone else. And if you have someone like Luke Goedeke, as I mentioned, I think is maybe we talked about that in the pre-show. I can't remember at this point, but Luke Goedeke is legitimately like the second best pulling tackle in the league right now. It's an unbelievable trajectory he's been on. So to do that, someone's got to pin around him, right? Now, either the right guard can go and try and seal across, but what's easier is if you put Cade Otton or someone next to him and you pin that way and then he loops around. That's what they did most of last season to get Goedeke into space. And if you can get two guys from the same side pulling, now we're really cooking with gas in terms of what we can do in the play action game. So that's what everyone's trying to get to. The key is how can you cheat your way to it, right? The best teams get to it with the receiver who blocks. That is the real cheat code, right? If the receiver can block effectively, now we've got a true receiver. We don't know what's coming out of there. So if they can get to that because someone like Egbuka or McMillan is really bought into blocking the way they were last season, there is no need to get to the 12 personnel. You get the same upside, the same benefit in the run game anyway. Blocking at that position isn't even about the technical stuff. I know you mentioned that you thought McMillan played better technically. It's just about effort and being in the way. The technical stuff we reserve for the inline guys who play up front, right? The run game guys and then the tight ends. The receivers, just be involved. Just buy us a second so we can get these guys whose job it is to go and pace people out, please. Like, that's what we're asking of those guys. So if they think they can cheat to it with receivers, that is the holy grail of modern offense that everyone's looking for, where it seems fun to bring the sixth lineman on, and it is fun, but it's less effective than if your receiver can just do it for you. So that, I think, would be the hope. If you have to go to a double tight end set to get to some of that stuff, what's interesting about Payne Durham versus Cade Otton, Otton to me has become the best split flow blocker in the NFL. So cutting back across the rest of the formation. All the line kicks one way, he slices across the formation the other way. It's really difficult to do at the highest level because everything's on the move. You're on the move. The team's on the move. They're reacting to you, the edge on the opposite side, rather than just being stood up in line. It's really, really difficult. He is extraordinary at that. Payne Durham is more of an inline masher. That's where you want him working in combination with someone else, whether it's with a tight end or with an attached, with a tackle or something like that, and then driving together. Then can he double and climb off? So you get into, I know it's maybe too dorky for listeners, but those are two really different skill sets. Now you compare those together where you get a double to one side and you split across the formation with Cade Otton. I just know if that's worth the investment. What is the upside of that investment? It's unnecessary when Cade is as good as he is, and you could just put an extra receiver on the field anyway. That would be more, just a blend, a change up, something different, or putting Cade Otton and Durham together to just drive people off the ball, like a kick and go, and we all drive together. But that's also not where Otton's at his best. So I don't think the skill sets naturally blend as well for you to want to base out of 12 personnel, because one is just so much better at one style, one is so much better at the other. I'd rather just put the best one on the field for the style. Even if you tip the cap slightly and you say, you know what we're going to do because one's on the field, I would rather do that. And there's no need to really take Cade Otton off the field because he's so effective at blocking in one style anyway. And he's happy to do the dirty work to get your guys to wrap around and pull around. That there's not really a need to have like a better, superior inline blocker on the field. So I think it will come down to the effectiveness of the third receiver and their willingness to stand in and dig people out, whether you make the move to say we're going to be more 12 personnel based, because you just get into these fake 12 personnels if you have a receiver as a blocker, and that's just way, way more effective than trying to force the tight end on the field just to say, hey, our numbers went up in 12 personnel, we're doing something different.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I think we've kind of gone through some of the more intricate parts of the Bucs from both an offensive and defensive perspective. What is your overall outlook for the team, just to kind of sum up, when you look at the roster construction that Jason Light has brought to this season, and then them versus, say, the NFC South landscape and the NFC overall? Do you think that this is a team that could make a push for a Super Bowl run? And then do you think that there's anything that truly holds them back? We talked a little bit about coaching, right, at the beginning of this podcast. And will Todd Bowles be the thing that holds the team back? We did not get into the quarterback. I've learned to not engage on such things with the passionate fans for Baker Mayfield that there are. But just your overall outlook for the team as they enter the 2025 season.
Yeah, like it's comfortably the best roster in the division. I think they are the best team building organization we have right now. You look at what they've had to work with. They're as good as it gets. I know Howie gets all the credit. You know my feelings on this. I think Jason Light is comfortably in that top tier with those guys, and to straddle the era navigation from the end of the embers of the Brady days to just like not missing a beat in terms of like not contending for championships, but remaining competitive when teams who are in a similar position to them, if you'd given that to any of these other, dumb stroke hilarious organizations we see across the league, right? Could you imagine the Jets trying to navigate from one era to the next doing that? It would have been a hellscape and a disaster. Now you look at them and say, that is a really exciting, intriguing, maybe best-in-class receiving corps. That offensive line finished as the best group in the league last season. I know the Eagles get all the hype, their offensive line, because of the individual stars. As a collective, there was no one more effective or better than they were. We all know about the explosivity of Bucky Irving and just the running back tandem in general of having two different approaches there. So everything is on the table for them offensively if Baker doesn't have these brain fart moments or these brain fart drives, honestly, where he just decides to try and gag the game away. And then I just want to see what the defensive evolution is. You get to the postseason, you got to win with a 4-man rush. It's the only answer. You don't get to send a 5 or 6-man investment against these guys you want to run through. Fortunately, you're in the NFC. And maybe, you don't have to face Jaden Daniels 1 week. You don't have to face Jalen Hurts, and you feel in a pretty good spot. You don't have to go through the gauntlet of the AFC, but you still at some point to try and get through at least an NFC title game, you're going to have to get pressure with 4. Whether that comes with these new simulated pressures or creepers, or it's just a 4 down and go, and our pass rush is better than your offensive line. That's the way you got to get it done in the postseason. There just isn't another way. We've gone through now, 10 years of really inflated blitz rates, really inflated sim pressure rates. And that stuff is all fun for guys like me to talk about and write about during the regular season. And then we get to the postseason and all these teams are flailing apart because they don't have a dynamic 4 down and go rush. And they're trying to stop Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and on and on. And it just falls apart on you. So that to me is just the key, as it is with every potential title contender, is once we get to week 8, what do the underlying numbers look like for the 4-man rush? Can you game your way through the regular season, winning week to week, game plan to game plan, doing all the blitz-centric stuff, being as creative as you want defensively, but keeping a track of what does the 4-man rush look like? So when we get to the playoffs and we've got to go and beat Philly in Philly, can we get home with 4?
Got it. All right, Ollie, I want to give you an opportunity to plug your stuff. I know you are running a special for your Substack as the NFL season is upon us. So where can the viewers find you to hear more about your work? And I believe your most recent work is the coaching branches from Rex Ryan, correct?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I've been working on this piece for like 8 months. So if someone could read it, that would be kind. If they go to the read optional, they'll find it there. The league that Rex built. I think it's one of the most extraordinary things in modern defensive football is that basically every single thing that's happening right now, a lot of the stuff we talked about at the top of the show, all flows from Rex Ryan, both from just the big picture outlook of how to view defense down to the specific like minutia of the calls and then how you teach those calls. Is all from Rex Ryan. And we hear constantly, right, about the McVay, Shanahan offense taking over the league. Have you heard anyone talk about the fact that Rex Ryan has taken over defensive football? I hear an awful lot about Vic Fangio, and I see all the guys who try and mimic Vic Fangio get fired within 2 seasons. That's what I see. Or they happen to coach the Eagles defense that gets smoked in the Super Bowl, but they get given a head coaching job. That's what I see from the Vic Fangio tree. I see Rex Ryan's tree putting together 11 of the top 12 defenses by EBA per play last year. Teams who copied his defensive style, took all the play goals, iterated on it. So it's really a walk through the entire landscape of how defensive football has developed over the past 5-10 years, which has been this unbelievable revolution going on from college up to the pros and back and forth in a way that we've just never seen happen in this sport before. That's not how defensive football evolves typically. Typically, it is the NFL tries something, college football takes it, tweaks it a little bit, makes it simpler, and they push it down to high school football. This is a true like my meld go-between between college football and the NFL, where you get someone like Mike McDonald who spends some time in college football, right? Comes back to the NFL, is the hottest candidate on the market. You see Jesse Minter walking in with the Chargers, where Brandon Staley trying to mimic the Fangio stuff, got himself fired, trying to play Vic Fangio ball. Jesse Minter comes in, they're immediately with a no-name roster, really, really effective because he's taking all those college principles, and all those things flow back to Rex Ryan. So yeah, you can go and read that piece on the read optional. If a single human reads it, that will be a success, and I'll be happy because probably only Rex's agent will read it at this point. But you can go there and sign up to read it. And as you mentioned, there is the preseason sale.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you joining us and kind of going through the nuance of the Bucs. I really appreciate it. You have taught me a ton about football, which I can't tell you how much I appreciate. So, so for Ollie Connolly, I am Josh Queipo. This has been a special edition of the Pewter Report podcast, and we will see you next time. Out.